So it's a great, wonderful honor to be asked to speak to you today. And it's great fun getting to see some very old friends, and some of us in this room have been on this journey together for more than 50 years. So it's quite amazing to see you. And I think it's amazing to see so many new faces, because someone needs to carry on this work. So it's great that we have some young folks joining us. And I think the most exciting thing for me is getting to see the students in the teacher preparation program that we've worked with for the last 4 years. Some are graduates and some are current students, and we have only met on Zoom for the most part. So it's great to see you in person. The title of my talk today is Emergence and Awakening, the unfolding of a new cosmic story. And I'm not sure how much time we'll have for questions afterwards, but Arun and I have prepared together. So we're sort of piggybacking on each other. And you'll have an opportunity to talk to each other and also to ask us both any questions. And I really would encourage any of you that have questions about what I say or want to talk, please approach me anytime during the next few days. I love to talk about these ideas, and I love to meet new people. So, since the beginning of recorded time and language, people have told stories that explain the created world. Stories of how the sun, the stars, and the waters were made, how plants and animals came to be, stories of good and evil, and how gods and goddesses have ruled our lives. Stories shape how we understand the world, and they have many functions. Cosmological stories explain why there is something rather than nothing, and I'm going slower now. How order emerges from chaos. Origin stories offer us diverse accounts of where humans came from. We were molded from the dust of the planet by a powerful God who eventually breathed life into us. Or we are the offspring of the sky father and the earth mother. Or once we lived beneath the earth and were brought to the surface by a great flood, taught by a deity how to build boats that carried us to dry land. Or we, like the other creatures who populate the planet, have evolved and changed through natural processes of selection and evolution. Stories are most often the part of oral traditions passed down through generations. Some are visual, drawn on the walls of caves or in illuminated manuscripts. Some were sung by griots or bards. Some are text-based, written on stone or clay tablets, papyrus, tree bark, and eventually paper. And now our stories are stored in silicon chips, encoded in bits of binary data in tiny memory cells. A worldview is a comprehensive story, a way of understanding the world that's shaped by our beliefs, our values, and our assumptions about the nature of reality. A smorgasbord of worldviews exists at any one time. We have pantheism, materialism, humanism, positivism, determinism, theism, transcendentalism, and postmodernism. Some worldviews are imparted by spiritual leaders, revealed in Scripture. Other worldviews long to be discovered or be created by human reflection on events. Worldviews can be all-powerful, capable of holding a global civilization. So in the Western world, medieval Christian church dominated the minds of people as well as government, religion, economics, and intellectual life for at least 1,000 years between the fall of the Roman Empire and when the Enlightenment commenced in the 17th century. And since that time, the world has largely been shaped by a constellation of stories, including the development of empirical science and technology, the power of reason and logic as a way of thinking and knowing, the emergence of the concept of the individual, which is a historical concept, as a separate entity, and the idea of human progress, which has been fueled by the relentless extraction of Earth's finite resources and capitalism as the ideology of improvement. Our modern worldview is like a house that we have built and are now trapped in. The walls and the floors and the ceiling consisting of our cherished beliefs, assumptions, and narratives that shape our behavior. The house has been built by custom, habit, education, religious doctrine, academia, institutions, and all the legitimating norms and values that have been passed down from generation to generation, including our biases and our prejudices. This modern worldview is firmly secure, locks on all the doors and the windows, and it's near impossible to break out of the house, or in common parlance, to think outside the box. But the earth is trembling, and the tremors are breaking open cracks and fissures in the house. Philosopher Bayo Akomolafe views cracks as disruptions in established systems, anticipated openings for richer complexities to emerge. And to carry the metaphor further, the fires, the hurricanes, and the floods brought by extreme climate change are collapsing many houses and causing multitudes of people to flee their supposedly solid and secure houses. Just as the material world is collapsing for many people, so is the old story waning. Prabhat Rainjain Sarkar, the originator of the philosophy of Neohumanism, spoke to this moment in time with the spiritual message, and he said, "Human civilization now faces the final moment of a critical juncture. The dawn of a glorious new era is on one side, and the worn-out skeleton of the past on the other. People have to adopt either of these two. And I would suggest that we are in between stories now, aware that the old story no longer serves the needs of life, hungry for a new cosmic story that can illuminate what we now know about the universe and how that new story can provide a pathway into a vibrant future. But before this new story can find its feet, we need to gather and bury the bones of the worn-out skeletons of the past, the remains of the isms that divide, conquer, and destroy us. Predatory capitalism, egocentric individualism, rampant materialism, anthropocentrism, sexism, racism, ethnocentrism, ageism, classism, and ableism, a lot of isms to bury. When we have put these tired bones to rest, we can begin to breathe the invigorating air of the new story. And it's a story that's coming to us from the integration of science and religion. What Brian Swimme, an evolutionary cosmologist, calls a cosmic creation story, conceived to inaugurate a new era of planetary health and peace. And there are a number of streams of thought feeding this new narrative. It's a story that draws on what we are learning from quantum mechanics, astrophysics, and complexity theory. A story coming from our exploration of space that tells us that the universe is not static, that is expanding each moment into previously non-existent space, that the universe is a dynamic, emergent reality. Some theoretical physicists now propose that our old understanding of the cosmos as a multiplicity of isolated particles has given way to a new understanding of the cosmos as an interconnected energy field that permeates all space, an invisible field that gives rise to all matter. They further propose that the fabric of existence is a unified set of quantum fields that bond with each other through a mysterious process called entanglement. Much like the ancient story of Shiva, the generative formless ground of all being, and Shakti, the dynamic impulse that drives creation, this story from modern cosmology suggests that all matter emerges from these quantum fields and that the creative impulse continues to flow, sustaining the enduring evolution of the cosmos. This comes very, very close to explaining the shared origins of all life, not only in the stardust of a Big Bang, but in a universal consciousness coupled with the profound creativity of cosmic expansion. It is a cosmology that suggests that consciousness is a fundamental property of the universe, present in all matter to some extent, down to the smallest particles of subatomic matter. It is a story that recognizes the multidimensionality of the human being and our relatively untapped sources of consciousness. Contemplative science, which is the vast amount of research on meditation, is now pointing toward unrealized dimensions of mind, a causal level of cognition encompassing everything in the universe, past, present, and future. This new story recognizes our oneness with all of creation. Of course, this new story is really an old story. People since the beginning of time have acknowledged the world as a sacred place and the human connection to a creator of all life. The new story is simply that we are coming full circle to a place that integrates contemporary scientific discoveries about the origins of universe and the nature of evolution with older spiritual and cultural perspectives. One of the theoretical physicists who supports the quantum field theory is Dr. Sarbamit Kanwal. I listened to a lecture he gave in which he talked about our human connection to this larger whole, this universal energy field that is invisible, intangible, and non-material, a vibrating field of potentiality. To activate the higher vibratory frequencies that would connect our limited psyches to this whole, he claims, working through the layers of identity that separate us from our cosmic origins. And I quote him here: "The great cosmic story of our origin reveals that every entity in our cosmos resides inside a single universe-wide evolutionary wholeness, giving us a new context for our existence." While it is scientists who have outlined this cosmological understanding, it is for philosophers, visionaries, artists, poets, and educators to explore the wisdom that emerges from applying this new paradigm of interdependent wholeness to the story of our cosmic evolution. And the great opportunity before us today is to tell this new universe story in a way that will serve to orient humans with respect to our pressing questions. Where did we come from? Why are we here? And how should we live? The new story also comes to us from an evolutionary biology that understands all of creation to be alive, intelligent, and self-organizing to various degrees. It's a story that tells of our entanglement in a web of life, one in which we have finally been freed from the false sense of separation from the rest of nature. The new story from Western science parallels more ancient indigenous knowledge in multiple ways, in the recognition that there is no separation between us and the whole of nature. That everything exists not as inert, mindless matter, but in relationships and fluctuations at the edge of matter and energy. That nature is not a collection of objects, but a flux of processes, and that everything in the universe is alive. As in many indigenous knowledge systems, the new story is essentially about relationships, connections with a pluriverse, not a universe, but a pluriverse of beings, plants, animals, animate and inanimate nature, connections with other humans. It's a systems model in which everything is literally connected to everything else. And from this connection can emerge a sense of radical empathy, and with it, the capacity to discern meaning and purpose. For meaning is fundamentally relational. We begin to see that we are not alone. We are not isolated creatures trapped inside our skin. We are porous, a part of everything. We breathe shared air. We are nourished from the soil and the living plants. And the way we live our lives has consequences for other lives. We begin to realize that we have been hostages of disconnection, and the tragedies are all around us in the form of mental and physical illness, drug addiction, violence, and despair. Neohumanism, very much aligned, I believe, with these promising new ideas, sketches the blueprint of such a story. It is a story that calls for a far richer, more insightful understanding of human possibility, one that decenters what people call human exceptionalism in favor of a new ecological consciousness, one that promises harmony and cooperation between humans and the rest of creation, and one that cultivates wisdom. In the remaining time of my talk, I want to address just a few key principles that weave their way through the fabric of this new story as it informs neo-humanist education. Our hope for the conference is that through our shared ideas, we will generate new narratives that lead us toward the next step in the evolution of human consciousness and the transformation of society toward greater justice, peace, sustainability, wisdom, and as our last speaker reminded us, joy. So at the very heart of the new story is what I call relationality, the cultivation of love and kinship with humans and non-human others. This is actually more complex than it seems at first glance. How is it possible to feel this all-encompassing love? I've been studying a lot about plants recently, and the intricacies of the plant world are now revealed by the electron microscope and time-lapse photography. The botanical sciences are exploding with information and empirical research that points to stunning revelations about plant intelligence, intentionality, communication, emotion, and even consciousness. These discoveries are leading us to rethink our assumptions about the nature of mind and matter. For so long, it has been assumed that only humans had consciousness. The rest of creation consisted of living, animate creatures like birds and bears, who were governed purely by instinct, or inanimate matter, like stones and mountains and chairs. But new understandings are leading us toward new relationships. Rachel Peterson there's a new initiative at Harvard University called Thinking with Plants and Fungi at the Center for the Study of World Religions. And it emphasizes that we need to understand plants on their own terms because they are so different from humans and non-human animals in their structure, function, and life. They demand that we, quote, marry the empirical with the imaginal. Now, what does that mean? In part, We need to bracket our methods of Western investigative science and learn from the countless indigenous, animist, and pagan traditions that have long regarded plants as persons, even relatives with whom we must cultivate reciprocity. This approach finds its expression in neo-humanism in what I have called, this is a big long word, epistemological pluralism. That means that we can value the multiple ways that we come to know the world, including traditional ecological knowledge and ancestral wisdom, as well as modern science. Establishing empathic connections with all of creation, animate and inanimate, and awakening to the realization of the self-organizing intelligence of the universe lies partly in observation and experience, but also in the imaginal realm, what some scholars describe as the metaphysical background of the world. Developing these suprasensory capacities, and by that I mean sensing that lies beyond thought and language, is the pathway to becoming one with the world, not merely one who stands apart from it. And cultivating these capacities lies in the next neo-humanist principle. It's the importance of fostering a balanced approach between inquiry into the outer objective world and the inner subjective world. Neo-humanist education, for those of you who are new to it, strives for a balance between what Sarkar called extroversial and introversial learning. Learning about the external world through the application of observation, inquiry, logic, reason, and critical thinking. Wonderful tendencies that have been brought to us from humanism. But also learning about the inner world and the subtle energies of emotion, intuition, values, aesthetics, discernment, and, I would say, interspecies communion through meditation, somatic awareness, and a deep engagement with the arts. And this holistic principle is designed to lead to the third principle, which is what Sarkar termed an awakened rationality, a mentality capable of discerning limiting sentiments wherever they arise. And we need to help people sort through the miasma of misinformation, fake news, pseudoscience, and superstition that permeates the current information atmosphere. We can only free ourselves from limitedness by expanding the periphery of our minds, moving beyond all narrow sentiments to social class, caste, race, religion, and self-interest to a place of love and respect for all beings. I'm struck by the resonance between the neo-humanist chain of identity, which many of you may have seen in this image, and Professor Canwall's idea that we need to work through the layers of identity that separate us from our source in order to activate the higher vibrations that connect us to the cosmic whole. And I will say that I believe that this pedagogical approach is at the core of neo-humanist education theory and practice. And overcoming limiting sentiments leads to the fourth principle, which is the cultivation of universal values. Neo-humanist education is a values-based character education that seeks to cultivate a set of universal virtues in young people, principles of non-harm, simple living, truthfulness, generosity, gratitude, and the cultivation of an ethical way of life that accords with these. In yoga philosophy, these are termed the yamas and the niyamas, though they find similar expression in many contemplative traditions. Values education, and this is the challenge, needs to seek consistency with local cultural norms and values. And where there is a contradiction, great sensitivity must be exercised. In neo-humanist education, morality is not to be dogmatically imposed, but the capacity for ethical decision-making, and balanced living is cultivated through critical thinking, reason, empathy, role play, debate, discussion, reflection, and engaged action. The cultivation of ethics leads to the last principle that I'll talk about, which is awakening the desire for social and environmental justice. In the 20th and 21st century, holistic education, which I've kind of been involved in for many years, decades now, has had a focus on individual spiritual development, a focus on human potential. Neohumanism balances the focus on the individual with an overarching commitment to the practice of selfless service and the facilitation of collective student agency to create a better world, translating values into action to achieve a sense of purpose and connection. Modern education, conventional education, is deeply rooted in the old story, the story of colonialism, industrialism, capitalism, consumerism, and a mind-numbing fragmentation of disconnected facts gathered in textbooks. Learning has been separated from life, people are separated from place, and children are separated from their own innate curiosity and drive to make sense out of the world. The patriarchal hierarchies that structure our societies find expression in grading, assessing, and ranking students, disciplining their bodies, and controlling the speech of children, all with the aim of creating efficient and compliant white-collar and manual labor classes to keep the engines of global capitalism running. What is mostly missing, except for some occasional window dressing, are empathy, community well-being, social-emotional learning, aesthetic expression, nature, play, and 1,000 simple pleasures that support planetary health and well-being. We live in an extraordinary time. I was born a year from the day that World War II, the deadliest conflict in history, ended, sparking moves to establish global governing systems to prevent such catastrophes from ever happening again. Yet, since that time, smaller but equally deadly conflicts increased steadily, bringing death, destruction, famine, and now a global refugee crisis. Humans have, for the most part, failed to heed the scientific warnings about global warming and climate change as we draw ever closer to multiple tipping points with unimaginable consequences. Scientists believe we are experiencing a sixth mass extinction driven largely by human activities. And I believe there's a small but growing clamor for a new story, a changing paradigm, a worldview that would center life and the flourishing of the multitudes of humans and other than human species who share this small and fragile planet. Human beings are narrative creatures. We make meaning through stories. And those stories inform how we act, what we protect, and what we believe we belong to. Education at its core is a space for meaning making. It can either reinforce dominant myths of isolation, scarcity, and conflict, or it can open new space for new narratives grounded in interconnection, reciprocity, or regeneration. To transform our current world systems, we must first transform the stories that sustain them. And education is where those stories begin. As we know from chaos theory, we know that small initial changes in a complex system, such as Gaia, our overarching Earth system, can lead to large and unpredictable outcomes. The butterfly effect, as pictured here, is a metaphoric concept for the idea that a butterfly flapping its wings in one corner of the world could in theory cause a tornado on the opposite side of the globe. Our choices matter. Our decisions make a difference. Even more when we gather to set goals and plans that can lead us to this bright new future. Neo-humanist education is not a finished product. It is a work in progress, a way of educating that has been built over the past 50 years by many hands, many minds, and many hearts, many of whom are sitting in this room. All of us, every single one of us, is important to that effort. And we gathered this week a global association of neo-humanist educators to educate ourselves about what a path forward can look like. And I'm going to ask my friend and fellow educator colleague, Carlos Torres, to speak some famous lines from a poem by the Spanish poet Antonio Machado, because they sound so much more powerful when spoken in their native tongue.
Thank you. Caminante, son tus huellas el camino y nada más. Caminante, no hay camino, se hace camino al andar.
Translated to English, this says, walker, your footsteps are the path, and nothing more. Walker, there is no path. The path is made by walking. This quote was made famous by two esteemed educators, Miles Horton and Paulo Freire, who popularized it with their book, We Make the Road by Walking. Recall the new cosmological story and its premise that the universe is expanding each moment into previously non-existent space, that the universe is a dynamic, developing reality. In this way, we are all here today, expanding into a new space, exploring a new way of thinking, creating a new story capable of bringing about this bright new era. We are all of us together, making the path by walking. In a time when our Earth and all societies face immense challenges, the need to gather in sacred community has never been more important. Together, we can rekindle our shared purpose to encourage, empower, embody, and inspire love, wisdom, and courage in education in order that our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, and the multitude of non-human others with whom they will share the planet might enjoy a bright new era. Thank you.